Here we are, everybody.
So, hey guys, welcome to the Jess John Pod.
Yep, here we are. Big news, right?
We
Anything to talk about on this thing?
Yeah, nothing really is going on. Why do we always say that? We have to always say that and never mean it. How's everybody
doing? Yeah, that is a really good question. How are we doing? Wow. I guess we're going to walk through our own feelings on this, right? This is the first time that we're kind of talking after the election. There's nothing really planned, but feels right to talk about, right?
Yeah, I think we couldn't have started this podcast now and not talked about the election. I think we both thought we were talking about different things. I'm not going to speak for you, John. You'll tell us.
I thought this was a cooking show, honestly, but you know.
No, I meant election-wise. What did you think going in?
Yeah, if it was a cooking show, I mean, maybe there's a place for "Are We Cooked" segment of this. What did I think going into the election?
I want to see John in a chef hat. Like, are we cooked?
Yeah, with a little rat controlling my brain. That would actually be nice.
Let the rat take over. Okay, I think that we're all in a weird place right now where Democrats don't want to hear anything about how they lost, but it's so glaringly obvious to me, and I would imagine every single working class person in the country, what is happening in our politics, and it's getting annoying that no one running the party is listening or catching on. I think there was a huge cultural shift that started before Trump was elected. And it happened like after I was in high school and probably while I was in college. And it was that it used to be uncool to not have nice clothes. It used to be uncool and shameful to have a beat up small house and come from a family that didn't have a lot of money. And then something changed where we started hating on rich people. Like, oh, you had it easy. Like, you didn't have to work that hard. And for some reason, our politics hasn't fully adjusted. But this idea that as a politician, you have to be pleasant, you have to be proper, there's a certain way to run when you're a candidate, a certain way to talk and act, and you have to be professional. I think that went out the window, and Trump noticed it, embraced it, embodied it, and it has nothing to do with like these policies are better than those policies. And I think everything to do with this reality that he talks in a way that's familiar to me. If Kamala Harris talked like a normal person, I think it would have been a very different election. And this cultural shift just has gone unrealized by the Democrats.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, I see a lot of, I already know where this is going to go, with the Democratic Party. And maybe we should start like talking about our kind of shared history working with the Democrats too. I guess I was the last to get the news, but I'll say it here. Bernie was right. I worked on the Warren campaign. Jess?
I worked for the Bernie campaign.
So you got it right, in my opinion. But, I think after huge losses like this, I mean, we're going into, a solid decade of talking about nobody but Donald Trump. We got another 4 years coming out of it. The Democrats have had a lot of introspection time here. And I know that this election loss is going to take us down a route of like a lot of the familiar things that happen after Democratic losses. Like, oh, we don't know how to talk to normal people. We don't know how to message. But I think how this strikes me is like our politics are just hopelessly out of touch with the realities that most Americans live and see before their eyes. Like, I think that, it's kind of like we went into the Obama era and it was like, oh my gosh, here's a guy who seems like it's a once in a generation candidate. He's offering everything that's good about America. He seems to have like this momentum that can overcome how baked in a lot of our problems feel. And maybe I can like trust him to carry what I want and to overcome like a lot of the bad things about our system. And now I think we're in an era where the Democrats are kind of like holding on to that magic. But the world has just grown different from that. Like, people are living in a world where, old people are working at McDonald's and Walmart. You can't retire. If you're lucky enough to have healthcare, it sucks. Millions of people don't have healthcare. And like for the first time, we saw all those demographics shift towards Trump. And I think what Democrats need to realize more than just messaging to get out of this is how most of the country is looking out and just feeling all of these problems intensify. And I think they see a person who reflects that to a degree in Donald Trump. Of course, he's lying about it. But then, you know, the Democrats are out there running on, you know, joy and kind of this West Wing perspective on the world. And it doesn't resonate with how you live life, as every one of those demographics, you know, white, black, straight, gay, rural, urban, they all shifted towards Trump. I think they're, you know, Democrats are not like reflecting a reality that a lot of people feel.
I totally agree with that. I think that as much as we can say I was right when I was with Bernie Sanders, I wasn't in 2016. I didn't understand politics in 2016. Yeah. I was still very much in the mindset of like, I come from a working class family and I haven't got out yet. And I grew up in one of those families where, you know, my dad was working, wasn't around a lot. I got politics from my mom. And it was a lot of like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. There's no like handouts. That's bad for the economy. Really believing the stories we've been told our whole lives and are taught in the public education system. And it wasn't until like years after Trump won that I understood what was happening in terms of corporate power and how the wealthy people have literally rigged the economic system so that money just flows in their direction without any work. That didn't sit right with me. And I remember it took one conversation with my mother, like, hey, we've worked super hard our whole lives. Are we doing better? And it was like, no. Do you think your boss works a lot harder than you? No. Do you think CEOs are working a lot harder than you? No. Do they work harder than all of us who with our own two hands get dirty and are at work for like way more hours per week than a lot of executives are? A lot of us are pulling 80 hours to make ends meet and our lives aren't better. And it was just like one honest conversation like that. And she was like, yeah, I get it. I get why you're saying to me you want to go work for Bernie Sanders when you have this job offer for Deloitte that is more money than anyone in our family's ever made in a year. It's just like obvious. It's like, yeah, we have to fix this.
That's such an interesting experience too. You know, like coming from, like you're talking about, coming from a working class family and then going to, you know, an elite college, like having kind of a carpet rolled out to you to join that class. How did that affect how you were thinking of things? And especially like after this election now, like, I don't know, I would like to hear more reflection on that.
I think that something interesting happened where right now Democrats are like, our economic policies are better. Trump is raising taxes for everyone unless they make $360,000 or more. What about Kamala Harris offering you this great $25,000 down payment assistance? What about Kamala Harris offering you a 5% cap on rent increases? Those policies are not relevant to someone who's living their life in survival mode. It's an insult almost to say, here's $25,000 in down payment assistance when most working people cannot save enough, let alone qualify for a home loan. There's also a ton of people in small towns and rural areas that look at that cap on rent increases, which, by the way, is a popular policy among voters in swing states and Republicans. But what she did wrong was she said for corporate landlords owning 50 units or more. I live in a small town. No one owns 50 units or more. That's not for most of America when you look at the land. And so it's just so sad when that's our reality. And I think that for me, like coming from a family that lives in survival mode, that can look at those policies and say, the elites don't understand us. We need more money and lower prices. We need the cost of basics to be more affordable. We're living our lives barely making ends meet. I think that for the upper classes, their life is so boring and it has no meaning. And I think people make a choice genuinely to live in survival mode because they frequently have an option to be a middle manager and be assholes to everyone around them. And they would rather be a genuine, loving person than live a life where they have to be mean to other people and struggle. And so I think a lot of people make this decision where they're offered, hey, join the upper class, join the upper middle class, join the middle class. And they say no because of what they have to do it. I didn't want to work for Deloitte. I didn't agree with them.
Yeah, this is so interesting because, to anybody who's watching this, maybe if you're familiar with me at all, probably not, but I work for More Perfect Union, and I'll go out and do a lot of like cultural pieces in really conservative areas. And I wear my politics on my sleeve. A lot of time I go into these places and I say, look, I haven't always been this way, but I'm a socialist, right? I took a look out at these problems and concluded that, working class people need control over these systems of production. Whatever job you go into, you should have a say in all that wealth that you're creating. And I kind of share this in some of the most conservative places. And I'm thinking from what you just said there, of a woman I met in Kentucky, and we're sitting like way out in a trailer complex in outside of a town which was the biggest in the county, and it had 600 people in it. And I was trying to understand, because a lot of folks, she was a proud Trump voter, and a lot of folks will say, hey, he's going to run the country like a business. He's a respected businessman, all this. But I tried to really get at what her feelings were towards a billionaire and towards people in those managerial roles, the people running our society, that we're all living with the consequences of whatever they build. And I thought she kind of reflected what you just said, which was like, sure, I was trying to say, can anybody earn $1 billion? We all get 24 hours. Like, if you were going to make $1 billion, how would you go about doing that? Can you earn that? Can you work hard enough for that? And she was like, maybe he didn't earn it. I think he probably did earn it. But the more important question to me is, who did he hurt to get there? Who did he hurt to get that level of wealth and power? This was coming from a solid Trump supporter. And it said to me that in a lot of people who are looking at this man and voting for him excitedly, there's a part of them that's not being spoken to by an opposition party to Donald Trump. And it's the part of the Trump voters who are saying, God damn, $1 billion is a lot of money. That's 999 million plus another million. Like, do you get that without hurting somebody? They know that this wealth accumulation is something that's probably negatively affecting all of us, but we don't have a candidate running against Donald Trump who's speaking to that part of the people who vote for him. And that's where I think we really went wrong here. Like, we have to recognize that I think we're in the middle of a political revolution. And the first piece of evidence was what Donald Trump was able to do to one of America's major political parties. This guy came in, he was a laughing stock. And then he stood on the debate stage and said, I bought you out. I bought you out. You all work for me. This is a joke of a system. And the elites, including Democrats, are like, yeah, look at this guy. What a funny sideshow. And they did not realize that the conditions for everyone in America are creating a system where a lot of people who are, dealing with a world kind of set up and run by billionaires look at him and see, a person. This is a great moment for our podcast, because I just talked myself into a corner where I forget where I was going. But I think the larger point is, like, we're in this political revolution that gave us Donald Trump right now. And as the opposition, people who oppose him, I think we need to recognize that there are things Trump supporters believe that we're not speaking to that can help us address the real problems of what's actually making life hard for people.
Yeah, I think anyone who lives in a part of the country that's a red state or a swing state, yeah, there's racist people here. But the average person that supports Donald Trump has friends who are Black, has friends who are illegal immigrants. I have family members who support Donald Trump who work with illegal immigrants and love them to death and were outraged when one of them was deported.
Yeah.
There's not as much of a connection from his platform and his beliefs and everything he stands for to the beliefs of the average Trump voter. And I think that's what's really hard, because when you look at that map and you see how he won, it can be easy to think about everything he stands for, everything he's fought for, the judges he's appointed and what they're going to go on to do, and to say, how could these people do this? We have to understand that the average working class person doesn't have time to think about politics the same way that everyone else does. They're working, they're taking care of their families. And I think our politics would be in a better place if we, one, don't assume everyone who voted for Trump was dumb, and that everyone who doesn't have a college degree is dumb. People in my life without college degrees are smarter than other people who have Ivy League graduate degrees that I know. And it's so frustrating that that's where our politics are at, is that the division doesn't extend beyond a simple one-level analysis. If you guys are really that smart, Kamala Harris loving Democrats who have no idea why she lost, think about it for another second. Think about someone you know without a college degree that you respect, that you think is intelligent. That is the voting class that you're demonizing and acting like doesn't exist and doesn't understand the world, doesn't understand what they're voting for, doesn't understand politics. It's not that they don't have the capacity to understand. It's that they have been forced in our society to work for a living and work so many hours and still not be able to afford a home and keep food on the table and cover their family's needs. And so when we're in that place, a lot of weird shit happens in our politics. It's not really reflective of the average American's mindset.
Here's some weird shit that happens in our politics regarding that. Like, if you're, it is pretty easy to go out there and say, oh my God, this is all racism and sexism. And yes, like that, those are baked into America. Okay. We gotta like actively deal with that if we're, going to progress as a society. But there are millions of people who voted for Barack Obama and Donald Trump. And my theory is that, I grew up in Appalachia. I grew up in Wellsville, Ohio. It's right on the river across from West Virginia, where I live right now. It's a town of 2,500 people. It used to be steel and manufacturing. And that was the Obama election was the first one I could vote in. And I remember knocking on doors for a black man named Barack Hussein Obama in my Appalachian town, of 2,500 people, where in the years running up to 2008, in my high school, there's military recruiters with a pull-up bar in the gym talking about how you sign up for the military and you can get a free Mustang and they're going to ship your ass to Iraq. I'm knocking on doors for Barack Obama here and getting a welcoming reception. Okay. In this area that I'm talking about, it's a part of the country that shifted furthest to the right the fastest. So I remember when in 2008, a lot of the people who right now today, during this election, they're the same people in my hometown. They voted enthusiastically for Donald Trump. And back in 2008, when I was knocking on the doors, they felt the same way about Obama, because this stuff in my area of the country has been happening for a long time. And when it was, Hillary Clinton versus Barack Obama in 2008, it was kind of the dynamic, like that primary race between Hillary and Barack Obama was very similar. If you were going to go talk to people, in Columbiana County, where I'm from, it's very similar to like Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. One was an outsider candidate that working class people, I think, could attach their hopes to for reform of a system that they felt was really not working for them. This is the height of the financial crisis. And they could see an outsider candidate who didn't have a lot of the baggage of being in Washington forever, that they could place their trust in to fix a lot of this stuff. And they did. And now it's a completely different story in my hometown, but for the same reason. They feel like an outsider candidate that doesn't represent but in any fiber of their body, this system, this status quo thing, that's who they're going with. And who better than Donald Trump? I mean, I'll end on this side. I feel like one of the problems that Democrats have is that they don't have any enemies by which you can judge what they stand for. Donald Trump has a lie to tell people. He says our enemies are immigrants. This is a lie. They're not causing your problems. But at least you can judge like something about him from that. And it's all bad things in my view. But for Democrats in this round, I mean, they look like the pre-Obama Republican Party to me. I mean, you have the literal Bushes and Cheneys in the coalition. And, you know, we're not taking a big, bold stance and saying, hey, if you're worried about egg prices, guess what? 3 companies control the entire poultry line and they can charge whatever you want, you know? So I think a lot of those dynamics have to be recognized when we're talking about what went wrong.
Yeah, I think that it's true that to vote for Donald Trump, you need to overlook his sexism, right? And what he's done in his personal life to women, his racism. And so many people know folks in their everyday lives where they overlook those comments all of the time. And that's America. But if we believe our country can change, I think we have to believe people can change. And I don't have faith in the American public education system to create a full picture of how systemic racism exists in this country and how the economy works. We don't even teach economics in K through 12. Of course, people, when they're told by a guy who's on a big stage, who's the presidential nominee, that the reason we're experiencing this hardship is because the resources are strapped because so many other people are coming in. That's an easier math equation that you can do with blocks than the extra few steps that are really there. And so, like, people can understand what's going on in our country. These voters are very smart. They haven't been given the opportunity to by America. And I think that's really where I land on this. Yes, Obama won because he was progressive. I posted that yesterday. I was like, look at the Obama map. You guys are all saying the far left is why she didn't win. He was a progressive when he ran. He was an economic populist to a degree. Definitely more than a lot of the other Democrats, definitely more than John McCain. And that's why I think we see this election cycle, this result, that even if you added together all of these third-party voters on the left, they still don't make up the margin that Kamala Harris lost by in the swing states. Even if all of them came in and casted a ballot for Harris, she still would have lost every single swing state. But what did win was a ballot measure in Missouri for minimum wage when Trump won by a huge margin, and a ballot measure for paid sick leave that won by 74% in Nebraska, where Trump won by a huge margin. And to look at those facts, to look at the last major win by the Democratic Party, and to say, we've pandered too much to the left, when literally Kamala Harris's brother-in-law is an executive at Uber and advised her to stop going so hard against corporations. And then the momentum died down immediately after that, and she went on to lose. Like, the evidence is all there. They're finding excuses and they're willingly ignoring it because they belong to the class of people that benefits from our economic system being set up this way.
Oh, Jessica. Yeah, good points. I, you know, as you're talking about that, it's like, what do we do about this? You know, here I am. I don't know if anybody else feels like this, but goddamn, if you cared about stuff for a minute, you know, it hurts to like care about things and like the direction of where we're going. But I think this is just such a political moment that we really can't let go to waste, in my view. You know, if you're around our age, you know, you're a young person. I don't know if you're sitting out here and looking, pick any number of problems, you know, just how terrifying climate change is, the advancement of AI and who that's going to be for. Pick any number of problems, right? And there's got to be a time when we rip the Band-Aid off and face the true scale of our problems. And where I'm going with this is just, there's going to be a lot of professional class people affiliated with the Democratic Party. A lot of them are going to be trying to figure out what to do. And a lot of them are going to be just making completely confident assertions, you know, like myself. They're going to be coming from the party and pretty certain about what we can do and what we can't do. They're going to be certain about the boundaries of debate here. And I just want to make a point that nobody owns, we are in a winner take all electoral system where we do get two parties basically. And that's the really hard part of it. And one of them is completely captured by a guy who took it over. But the other one isn't owned by the people who made bad strategies that keep either, they keep losing to people like Donald Trump, or that keep, that kind of capture and kill this obvious momentum, this obvious demand out in the public for a true working class movement. I feel like a lot of the times the outcome of the Democratic Party, what it functioned as, is a place where working class movement energy gets channeled into and then dies. And those people making those confident assertions who are affiliated with the party right now, we don't have to listen to them. If you're out there right now, like, what the heck do we do about this? I am so scared about the problems. Like, it is ours to take over, and this is the moment to really make sure that our politics matches the problems that we face, because nobody's going to have to live through it but us. And I really want that to take hold in this moment. That's just a personal feeling that I'm like, man, it's got to be now. I can't go through another cycle where they're like, oh, you know what? Let's run Gavin Newsom. Let's pick somebody, with a nice haircut and a suit and, focus group, and let's tweak their messaging since Donald Trump dealt us such a blow. Like, we can take the opposition movement to Donald Trump in a beautiful direction that resonates with people out there, like, doing their best to live their life. And we got to do that now. I don't know. How do you feel about, like, where we are in this moment? How do you make sense of that?
Yeah, I think anyone who worked for this election cycle and was leading on the messaging, you're out. Like, it should be an automatic disqualifier that if you lose, we don't take your advice. Why was Hillary Clinton giving Kamala Harris advice? And I also don't buy this narrative that America's not ready for a woman president. I don't. Because look at Hillary Clinton. She ran as an elitist. She was running against a populist. She also ran in Bill Clinton's shadow. Her campaign was totally in the shadow of the man who signed NAFTA. And so she couldn't distance herself from it. Similarly, Kamala Harris couldn't distance herself from Joe Biden in a meaningful way. So it's not really about America's not ready for a woman leader. It's about America's not ready to go through the same shit that it went through under the male leaders that these women were running in the shadow of. Not to mention Kamala Harris, coming from San Francisco, she is someone that was influenced by the elites from her hometown. This is also why when we pick leaders, we want them to come from a working background. We want them to be people who have looked at money and power in the face and said no to do the right thing by the loved ones in their lives and their communities. Like, that's the floor of someone we elect to serve us. They have to prove that they can. And it's ridiculous that Democrats don't know that. But I think the cultural shift has already happened, that people don't want that. They voted against that multiple times. And so I think people are ready for that to change. But we don't have to say, like, people are ready for that to change. We can just do it, right?
We got to do it.
We need permission from the Democrats that this is what we're doing now. No. The left doesn't. Working people doesn't. As long as you're not in the Trump camp, you can say this is what we're doing now on the other side.
One of the things that's funny, that I'm 34 right now. So I've had like several of these moments in my life where I'm like, I'm starting out at a low position in my first job. I'm, volunteering on campaigns. Okay, now I'm working on campaigns. Okay, now I'm like higher up on a presidential campaign. And the higher you go, the more I found out that the people above you, senators, chiefs of staff, immensely powerful people who are making decisions for all the public people, they are not better than anybody walking around off the street. They really aren't, and we just, if you're not in that realm and you're just kind of accepting the authority of these people, you think, oh, there are adults in the room who have it figured out, or, oh, I can't run for politics. That's for people who are like smart and think about politics. And we got to kill that notion off too. I mean, for God's sakes, Donald Trump's the president. Anybody can do what they want. It's about time that we like really internalize that. And as everybody's spilling ink and figuring out the lessons of this election, I think it's always going to pay off for everybody to do what they can to bring their grain of sand to kick off a working class movement with no permission needed. We do not need any permission. And to really, if I had a magic wand, hijack the infrastructure of a political party and inject the working class movement into that and just go to the races. I mean, now is the time to do that. And you shouldn't, if you're out there listening, you shouldn't really feel constrained by a lack of background in this or something. I think if you're a working person, you should just straight up, if you had the luxury to do this. Unfortunately, this is kind of how they get you, right? Who has the time to run for office when you got to wipe a bar down? But man, if you're in a position to do it, I really hope that's the direction this goes.
Yeah. I'm going to get maybe a little like woo-woo for a second.
Oh, please, let's do it.
I think human beings are fundamentally influenced by our survival instincts because our evolution has not been able to catch up with technological and societal advances. That sounds crazy, but basically I think when we are not having our needs met, it's very easy to be afraid of people who are different from us because of how human beings existed on Earth. Like, we shouldn't be afraid to bring in like the anthropological perspective, people who studied human beings and how we became, what we consider modern civilization members. I think that because everyone was fighting over resources and land for so long, human beings spent so many years killing like the nearest evolution to human. So people that look different from us. And I think there's a part of all of us that hasn't gotten over that like this person looks different from me. That's scary on a very fundamental level. And you can have a reaction to that can be extreme and violent. That's what human history tells us. And so there's a certain tribalism to our politics where we're told be afraid of that person, and we do. And Steve Sloman, who's a cognitive psychologist, I got to learn a bit from him when I was in school. He did research where he asked a group of people, all right, Congress does not understand this piece of legislation. How well do you understand it? And people were like, I don't know. If Congress understands it, I think I understand it. When they say Congress doesn't understand this legislation or the impacts of it, they say, I don't understand this legislation. We have something ingrained in us that other people in our community's knowledge we think is our own. And so in voting, we're like, well, I'm on Team Red. And I trust Team Red implicitly because that's my tribe. We don't question it. But the study continued on and they said, can you explain to me how you draw a bike from scratch? Lots of people were like, I fully understand how bikes work, of course. The chains weren't connected. The wheels weren't connected. It was a nightmare. And then when they demonstrated that they didn't understand it, they were much more willing to be persuaded in another direction. That actually, I don't understand how bikes work. And because we know a bike mechanic and we know we can go get our bike fixed, we kind of believe that knowledge is our own. But when we ask someone, hey, can you explain to me how Trump's tariffs will impact prices? They're much more likely to come to a middle ground versus if you're like, fuck Trump, and they're like, fuck Biden, fuck Kamala. And so I think that we have to recognize our tribal instincts a little bit.
Speaking to like going off of your point about the tribalism in politics, I feel like that does govern so much of our political reality. And it also is like, it's been commodified and kind of sold back to us like everything else. It feels like a sport. It feels like something you consume through your phone. It feels like something that you commentate on and talk about with your friends instead of something that you actually do to influence the direction of who has power and how it's applied and what it means to your life. And I think we're living in a world that is shaped, not saying anything new here, more than anything from the right-wing media ecosystem and how that has developed But to your point about tribalism, I think they have left their flank. And if you're a right-wing media strategist or, a right-winger strategist, just tune out here as I talk about, ways to overcome the Death Star that he built that now has us in its all-powerful and knowing beam. Sorry, this is not funny. I mean, we are like in a serious situation. I think right-wing media left their flank completely exposed when they made the tribalism that we have in our politics right now completely based on hating the Democratic Party. If you go out and you talk to Trump supporters, this is my experience. I've always lived in conservative counties for my job. That's what I do. I go talk politics in conservative areas. The right wing has made everybody just live in a world where, Democrats have horns coming out of their heads and they're keeping kids in, the basements of pizza shops and they're doing this, that, and the other thing. And the second that you say, hey, man, I'm on the left, but the Democrats are growing away from me too. They're not serving me. They're not directing power to people in a way that they often say that they are. They're not challenging corporate monopolies that, even if we are kind of making a little bit of progress with, capping the price of insulin or something, we're just on a ceaseless march where these guys who have hundreds of billions of dollars right now, if you rewind back 10 years, they had like $20 billion. So I look at this party who says that they want to take on corporate power, and I see that corporate power is marching along just fine. And I don't like these people either. And you and I, a Trump supporter and a working class, socialist, we have a lot more in common. And the party you would expect me to vote for is doing me dirty. So how about you and I figure out what we want and how to really exercise power? When you remove the Jenga block that right-wing media built this whole system on, they focus their point of distrust on Democrats. And then you say, hey, I don't trust Democrats either. People don't have the tools. They've only been supplied with the tools to fight somebody who claims to like the Democratic Party. Okay. And this is a massive weak spot in their system because, like you said, Jess, we saw an independent candidate in Nebraska where a Democrat did not run. Just by lopping off the D next to his name, he gains a 10-point margin. He ultimately lost, but he was putting up Sherrod Brown margins, who also lost, but in a much more red state. You see progressive policies, minimum wage, weed, paid sick leave, abortion, like you outlined, passing in all of these red southern states, not affiliated with the Democratic Party. Okay, if your analysis relies on, blaming Trump voters for just wanting everything bad, they're turning around and voting for the policy platform of the Democratic Party right now. Because all of this right-wing media has been trained on just the scariness, the boogeymen of Democrats, okay? But maybe this gets us into a system of given the political reality, where do we go from here? How do we turn power to working class people? Do we have to wait to rebrand this? It's like we got two cars to run away from the fire. One car was stolen by a madman. The other car has an engine that's sitting outside of the car and its tires are flat and it's full of people who want to keep the car parked as the garage is burning down around it. This is our Democratic vehicle. How do we get to where we're going when this is the only tool that we have? And what I would point to is that in the places you saw these progressive policies succeed that weren't affiliated with Democrats, those places describe 40% of the congressional districts in this country, right? If you're running working class candidates like Dan Osborne in 40% of these congressional districts where putting a D next to your name is already ending the election before it even began, I see no reason for Democrats where the party has already been nuked into the ground, not to recognize that it's a better strategy to run working class independents who are championing your policies anyways in places where the odds of a Democrat getting elected are very low. That doesn't count for every race. I mean, we can keep the party around where it's very competitive in my opinion and have really, I want some brutal primaries out of this. But I think in a lot of rural working class areas like mine, look, get creative, run independent candidates, run people who look like the electorate that they come from, run people who speak in the language of the voters who are going to be voting for them, run people independent of this political party that demands you pay dues and wait your turn and have coronations. We don't need any of that shit anymore. And that's the reality for 40% of the districts in this country. So I'd like to see us get like creative and do a patchwork of stuff to really get to where we want to go.
We need an outsider to take over the Democratic Party who has a demonstrated record of making life better for working people. I think that the
Sarah Nelson, you out there?
They're so calculated that they have, I think, fucked us. Why did Biden invite Sean Fain to the White House? Biden has a record that's more pro-worker than a lot of other presidents. The bar is in hell in the United States of America. But Sean Fain, by going, I think now there's going to be pictures of that when really he is someone that's called for a general strike that could very well be someone who runs for office and does exactly like we're saying now, runs on actual issues and has the credibility of being an outsider. Now they've taken that identity away from him. I hope not. I hope he can do it. But we really need someone who hasn't been in the room with them before to take over, because what they're doing isn't working. And we can't have the country descend into right-wing fascism. And I think the reason that we see these results of these ballot measures and the polling showing that Republicans support eliminating medical debt and building affordable housing and all of these things that are usually associated with progressives, it's a part of it is the tribalism. Like, oh, when my team does it, it feels safe, it feels good, but I don't trust the other guys to do it in a way that doesn't end up hurting me because they're the other guys and they've hurt me before with NAFTA or whatever broke their hearts with the
I still hear the giant sucking sound in my part of the country from NAFTA. You remember that with Ross Perot? Giant sucking sound? It's still going on, man.
Yeah. They don't trust the Democratic establishment, and we need someone else to take it over. That's how
Brother, I do not either.
Yeah. And I think that one thing went terribly wrong, which, my boyfriend pointed out that I hadn't internalized before, but I believe it to be true, that like Trump did this thing where everything people didn't like about our culture, oh, cancel culture, we can't make jokes anymore, we have to talk a certain way, and you can't. It was really an anti-populist movement at the end of the day, that you have to speak so intelligently and be politically correct. And the social issues are not things you can grapple with. You have to just understand that people are gay and transgender now, and women have equal rights, and family roles are out of the picture. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you suck, put on a pantsuit. Like, this is really how people felt. And I think that Trump saying, this is the Democrats, he's kind of right that a lot of them were Democrats, but not everyone on the left was like down with the worst parts of cultural change. And cultural change is always uncomfortable. And for him to say, it's okay, gays for Trump, I love you, look at this Black American in the crowd, so beautiful. Like, it's cool when he does it, but when other people embrace diversity and cultural change, they own the worst, most uncomfortable parts of it. And I think he did that, and it gained him so many voters. And he made the cultural conversation so awful and much more in the front of our politics, when really we need these guys to build schools and roads. And it doesn't need to be about who's gay and making laws about abortion and healthcare. It didn't need to be about that. But he wanted to win, and this got people riled up.
Yeah, I think I think you're putting out like a really great thing here, and that's how we see Donald Trump address these things, and then we look to how the other side is addressing it, Democrats, right? And it's similar to how you outlined, but another thing that you brought up where I think it has a lot of things that we can look to in this moment and really make a part of the opposition movement to Donald Trump is how things work. For example, in say Sean Fain's UAW union, right? Or any union movement. We've got a lot of promising ingredients. We've got a lot of new energy happening behind the American labor movement. We've got exciting new leaders, Sean Fain, Sarah Nelson, you can go right on down the list. A lot of them and the hotel workers in Vegas are doing amazing things. But what is that, right? What is a union? You are joining together at your workplace and you're using your collective power to go directly up against corporations to win material benefits in a contract going directly to people. You have a say and power over the autocracy of workplaces. You know, we want to be free and democratic, but willingly and by necessity, we hand our lives over for 8 hours a day and a lot more for a lot of people to an unelected, boss who rules over us for that. In the union movement, though, in a workplace, you have all kinds of difference. Racial difference, political difference, gender difference, sexuality difference. And when you're in a union and you're going up against your corporation for benefits that's going to trickle out equally to all of those people that I mentioned, you, by necessity, have to understand each other, have to accept each other, have to stick together and not let those things divide you, or else you're not going to win the contract. So in that model, in that movement, I think is the answer to competing with the vision of America that Donald Trump is putting forward, but in a way that is real, that offers people material benefits, and that does not sacrifice those by throwing out this conversation of race and gender and sexuality. It's those things that we need to understand about each other, to hold together in a coalition, to stick together and challenge corporate power. We are seeing that happen right now and win against some of the biggest corporations on earth. And that has got to be the foundation that we rebuild the smoking, smoldering corpse of the Democratic Party, the only one that we have to oppose the fake, movement filled with lies of this man who is winning the hearts and minds of our compatriots.
Yeah, some very non-good stuff is going to happen.
Very non-good stuff.
On January 20th and the 4 years after that. However,
a lot of bad.
These CEOs that are working for the corporations getting tax cuts under Trump and personal tax cuts with their income, because definitely a lot of them are earning over $360,000 per year. So Trump's giving them tax cuts at home. Their corporate profits are going to be able to be used for whatever they want. We saw corporate profits increase so much. So if you're a working person and you're struggling, and you can look at the impact of the last Trump presidency, but I think it's really going to happen under this one, where you're expecting him to lower your prices. We're going to see these tariffs go into effect. There are already manufacturers trying to buy in bulk now, and they're using money that was supposed to go to Christmas bonuses and wage increases potentially. Now they're using that money to buy in bulk all of the goods that they need to import before these Trump tariffs go into effect. This is going to have immediate ramifications for working people. Then, when they go into effect, of course, every single corporation, instead of taking money that they could keep, and it would go to their shareholders, it would go as bonuses to the CEOs, it would exist as profit, they're not going to have the tariffs come out of their cut. It's going to come out of consumers' cut. Of course, they're going to raise prices. There's no law that says they can't to cover the cost of the tariff. That's just how business works. If Trump did that, they would say, what a very smart businessman. What a great idea for you to raise prices and keep shareholder returns high. No, it's horrible for everyday people. We're going to see prices go up. And these CEOs are such egotistical maniacs that every single person who works at these huge companies can see how much of assholes they are. And that is exactly what the American ruling class does. I was only able to get a college degree because the ruling class of America is terribly greedy. They wanted to loan me out that money and make all of the interest off of me. But those fucking idiots let me learn about economics and let me learn about how they rig the system.
And now you're spreading this information on the net?
Their greed and mania will be their downfall. So while we're getting richer under Trump, every working person's going to be watching and they're going to hate them. And while I think a Trump presidency isn't good, I think that is a lesson that the American people are ready to learn and excited to learn. And I can't wait to post clips of Doug McMillon on fucking CNN in a squawk box and be like, look at this guy. Listen to what he's saying.
Yeah. It's like, whoever had the quote, it's like whenever you run a Republican against a Republican, you can bet that the Republican is going to win every time. I think that the danger that we're in is that as long, Trump is offering fake populism. And as long as you're not running somebody that represents, real economic populism against Donald Trump, I think you always run the risk of people making it easier for people to believe that he is actually working on their behalf. And I think that's what we keep seeing over and over again. I mean, we haven't really had, the Sanders campaign is the best example of it, but that was never really cut this out of the podcast, carried to term. We never really got to see, Bernie up on the big stage against this. And honestly, the last time he ran, the world is very, very different from that. And I think we do run the risk, as long as we don't put up real economically populist candidates, of people kind of convincing themselves in the absence of that the most real version is this guy. So that's why I think we need to make an immediate change.
Yeah.
I
think what I will say is we're going to have a really big tax fight over the next few years, changing the tax code. And I think a lot of people are scared about what's going to happen under Trump, but I'm going to be focusing a lot of my energy on reporting on that. And I think social media has changed the way news happens. Yeah. And it's been demonstrated before that when big pieces of legislation like this are on the table and you have good reporting on precisely what these idiots are trying to do and how it will affect people, they will flood their Congress members with calls and it will influence the legislation. So if we all come together, we can have a multi-trillion-dollar impact on the economy. And I think people are ready for that. And I think maybe if Kamala won, everyone would have gone back to brunch. That would be a part of that movement.
I was going to, here we are making content after the election. The content I thought I was going to make was, we are not going back to brunch. Mm-hmm. Because even if Kamala wins, all of this stuff, our problems are just really big and our politics don't match them. But that's why I do think that, there really are no rules in this moment. Okay, we are stuck with Donald Trump for, maybe 4 years, maybe 40 years. I mean, he's not going to be alive, but honestly, anything can happen here. Not. What's that?
He will definitely not be alive in 4 years.
Well, Jessica, I don't know if you've accounted for the, chemical composition of McDonald's and Diet Coke, but it does have much the same effect as formaldehyde. So he might already be dead, but
preserved.
Yeah, preserved cryogenically.
Our first taxidermy president.
Yes.
Just prop him up there. Let everyone.
That makes a lot of the haters, losers.
Elon guy will voice him.
I think that's what we're headed towards, honestly. It's like, no, I'm not going to get crazy here. I was going to go.
No, we're not going to do the what if everything goes really bad. No.
I don't know, man. It's pretty bad out there already. I think we got to swing for the fences.
It is pretty bad. And I did wake up the morning after the election with a feeling that I've never had before of like I felt it physically. I'm with a man now, but I'm gay. Like every year before that, I was a queer woman. I mean, I'm still queer, but I don't present as that way. So I'm not as afraid of the shift in society now that people are emboldened because they're like, I think we won and we all hate gay people now and we can't say it in schools and really dominating what we teach our kids about being gay. And I was also afraid because a year ago in December, I was on a birth control that was high in estrogen and I got a blood clot that passed through my heart and settled in my lungs. It's called a pulmonary embolism. And so I was hospitalized and I was like, oh my God, like I almost just died. It was very scary. I was on blood thinners for a long time. I'm healthy now. I don't take it anymore. But they were like, typically women who experience this because of the hormone shift in pregnancy, they're at a greater risk for having blood clots while pregnant. And I was like, if I have a kid in the next 4 years, because I'm in a state with a 6-week ban, if I have a complication like this, there's a chance that the doctors will let me die. So my constitutional right to life is not protected. I said to my boyfriend, I was like, you don't get it. Like, he gets it, but I was just mad. I was like, right now, like, men, if something threatens your life, you can kill it. If something threatens my life, I can't kill it.
That is extremely dissatisfying for you. Yes, I could only imagine.
Yeah. And it's like, there's going to be some lawsuits around that. My right to life is not guaranteed in the United States of America.
Yeah.
You don't value one over the other. If one life is threatening your life, it's weird because they're interconnected. What do we do with that? There's going to be some lawsuits because Republicans seem to think that there are exceptions. But what we've seen in practice is that doctors are afraid to go to jail for life. And so what are we going to do?
Yeah. That's the odd thing about this election. It happens. Politics feels like this thing that we consume that we don't really influence. And then you kind of step back and you realize, this is another good point to make. I don't want to hear shit, really, about anything anymore being too radical. I don't, because how radical is it that a man just won the presidential election with a mandate that is putting you in that situation and millions of other people like that? How radical is that? How radical is it to go out and say with your full chest, we are gonna deport millions of people by force, and we're gonna
How are you
like
gonna pay for it?
Oh yeah. How radical is that? This guy is the most radical person that there is. I mean, this election was between a radical and a conservative. And Kamala Harris was a conservative, and this guy is the radical. Okay, so when we're talking about making our politics update our fucked up, like match our fucked up reality, the fact that we are baked into climate horrors that previous to yesterday were the worst case scenario and now are the best case scenario, that is radical. Okay, so we really have to have an update in this moment and recognize, just like you mentioned, that everybody is going to experience this in their own way. And a lot of people are going to experience it much more than others. And just the fact that that is what we can expect from this election is radical. And the country gave this person a mandate. They were ready for radical change. Okay, so let's give them what they want in a way that really addresses the problem, that turns power back to people, that gets people out of this situation that we don't have to put up with. It doesn't have to be this way. And let's see that, and let's see that come out of all of the thought that's going to be put into where we go from here.
Mm-hmm. How I feel right now is like, you ever play beer pong at a party and you're like,
no, I'm a good Christian boy.
Yeah.
What's it like?
You're like, I got next, and you're like watching them lose, and you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna hang out right here. Like, no need to come in and do celeb shots, but like, I got it. Like, when I'm that's kind of how I felt with politics. I was like, I don't need to say too much. Like, I just felt like it wasn't my turn to like say everything I think yet. I don't know why. I make a lot of decisions based on my intuition. That was what my intuition told me. And so I grew this presence right after Bernie of just talking about politics online, really explaining how our economic system is fucked and demystifying that story told by the 1%. And I think every single person that's living in this economy deserves to understand it. And I felt pretty, sold that it was something I wanted to do to tell everyone how fucked it is. But I think now I'm kind of like, you guys lost, my turn on the table. Like, people need to listen to us. It just feels very right to be having a cathartic conversation about the election and like starting this podcast where we really need I don't know, to be talking about politics and policy and economics now, because I feel like the shift has just happened on Tuesday.
Yeah, there's no rules, man. And we can take this shit over. And I'm just so goddamn tired of being told that somebody in a suit that talks like a focus tested robot that really doesn't have an analysis of power who's causing our problems. I'm so tired of being
Shut up,
told.
Nerd. Not you, them. Sorry, John.
Nice. I was like, oh.
Not you. The guy in the suit.
Exactly. Yes. I'm tired of being told that we just have to accept that and we can really make it our own and run with it. And we owe it to ourselves because we're going to live through the realities of all of this. I know we're coming up on an hour. We are starting a podcast. Do you want to talk about ourselves?
So this is a weird first podcast because it does feel like we're just saying what we think about this past election. And I think our other episodes might be different, but this is who you're going to get when you listen. But what we want to do is really cover stories that matter. So I'll be reporting a lot as a correspondent with Drop Site on the tax fight, on what they're trying to do economically, whether it's monetary policy or fiscal policy or with trade. Also what's happening in the labor movement. This is going to be a place where we have honest conversations about that in a way where we're covering stuff that I think the mainstream media has intentionally ignored.
Hell yeah. I'm here for comic relief. I'm just kidding. I can't do that very well, but let's see. Yeah, we're here. We are starting a podcast. What a weird time to start a podcast, just as you said, Jessica. But I think now more than ever, what's clear to me, in case we hadn't covered this in our initial conversation, is that the time for a working class revolution in our politics is nigh, dear sweet listener. We are all watching as it gets harder to just earn money going to work. We're watching a set of problems before us that we're going to have to live through, and we're kind of locked out of talking about and solving them. And I really think I look forward to covering in this podcast ways to turn power to working class people, to talk about the news in terms of how things are going to affect working class people, to hold institutions that claim to represent working class people to account. And the work that I've done in the past, I've come from Appalachia, and I like to, I work with More Perfect Union and independently, and I like to do big picture cultural and political pieces where the central question is, how do people who share the same class interest get to a place where we can live the life that we deserve in a country that tells us that it is ours to run when it doesn't feel like that a lot of times? And what I hope to get to in this podcast is talk about the road to get there, because we're a long way away, but I think we have a fresh start now, and we have everything ahead of us, and we don't have to be constrained by a lot of the stuff that got us to a result like we saw on Tuesday. And if you're looking around and you're wondering what to do, I hope you can find some power in the stuff that we talk about here.
Yeah, I think that was good, John. I don't know what else. Everyone should
smash, like, and subscribe.
Like, subscribe, share, and check out John's work. I think he was too humble in describing it, so see it for yourselves.
Yeah. If you didn't notice, I did speak at the DNC, and ironically, I'm not proud of this, but I, wrote that speech, if you go and watch it, for a moment exactly like this, because I could sense through my work, talking to working class people, especially in a place where I live now and grew up, that there are a lot of politically homeless people out here. And the fact that so many of them are flocking to Donald Trump is an indictment on who else we put on offer to represent the energy and demand for a working class politics. And that's what I tried to outline in the DNC speech, that as long as we have these two parties, we have got to make one of them into the home for a lot of people of all races, genders, and demographics who are searching for a political home right now, and the only place they're finding is Donald Trump. We got to offer something better than that. And that's what we're going to be talking about, hopefully on this pod, and how you can, get involved in that and build it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the other political podcasts out there are backed by billionaire interests with an agenda. We're not. I'm
in my kitchen, dude. Do these scissors look like they're backed by a billionaire agenda? They're barely hanging onto my wall over here. So it's very DIY.
I don't know if you can tell, but my IKEA dresser and thrifted lamp, a lot of people think that you go to a school like Brown and then you're wealthy. That does not happen, especially if you leave and immediately talk about overthrowing the ruling class in a political revolution in a TED Talk at Brown right after you graduate. They don't invite you back for shit after that. So we're just regular guys. No one's paying us to say this.
I'm tired of this shit, Grandpa.
I'm tired of this shit, Grandpa.
I've had too many slices of monopoly billionaire capitalism. That's enough, please.